I'm Robin Miller-Brecker.
And I'm Karen Lenzer. Welcome to Seeking Center, the podcast.
Join us each week as we have the conversations and weed through the spiritual and holistic clutter for you. We'll boil it down to what you need to know now.
We're all about total wellness, which to us means building a healthy life on a physical, mental, and spiritual level. We'll talk to the trailblazers who will introduce you to the practices, products, and experiences that may be just what you need to hear about to transform your life.
If you're listening to this, it's no accident. Think of this as your seeking center and your place to seek your center. And for even more mega inspo, sign up for Seeking Center, the newsletter at seekingcenter.app. Karen came across Heather Wright Fitzgerald from Tea and Tarot several months ago. Tea and Tarot is located in Madison, Connecticut. It is a small business with mighty and far-reaching energy. We were so impressed by Heather's offerings, readings, and newsletter that we had to find out more. Heather is an herbalist and a tarot practitioner. She blends these two passions together with the goal of leading you towards greater wisdom about your life's journey. While she sells many selections of herbal teas, it is the combination of a traditional tarot card reading with herbal tea or flower essence that then allows you to take the energy of your reading and feel it on a daily basis. We're going to talk more about the power of tea and tarot and the journey behind this woman-owned, Black-owned, and LGBTQ+ owned magical shop. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather. We're so excited that you're here today. We have been following you and your work for quite a while. We're not quite sure how we stumbled upon it, which I love in a way. I think it's just magical that we were able to make this all work and find you and connect. Let's start by diving in and telling us a little bit about what an herbalist is and how did you come into being an herbalist?
Yeah. So believe it or not, I don't use the word herbalist yet. I'm very new in my journey. Most of my teachers who I study from have been herbalists for 20, 25 years. So their depth of experience is much richer than mine. I feel herbalist, it's really reserved for somebody who spent a long time studying, because you have to think about that there's thousands of plants out there. There's so many different ways to work with them safely. And there's so many different things they can do for our body, as well as possible contraindications with other medications and things that people are doing. Because that is such a huge subject to dive into, I was always taught, at least from my herb teacher, that we reserve that word for people that have a decent amount of experience. Now, there are at-home herbalists, people that just at home with their families, they call themselves herbalists, and they may or may not have clinical experience. There's a wide range of ways that people use that word. For me, my herbal journey and education is ongoing. It should be for the rest of my life. For right now, I use herbal wellness coach because I'm a certified health coach with an herbal twist. So I've probably spent about 5 or 6 years now studying herbalism, and I hope to continue.
I think that goes a long way to talking about the incredible integrity. And I know that we'll talk a little bit more about that. What in your mind then allows you to really lean into that title? How much study, how much time spent? And also talk about where you studied, because I think that was
very important.
I think that people may be interested in that as well.
Absolutely. One of my herbal teachers always said that there are so many different ways to approach herbalism and that you should learn from as many teachers as you can. And I've been privileged to know 2 of them in person. So I studied with Rosemary Roast in Winstead, Connecticut. Her entire yard is just all things that she grows. She knows how to do preserving and canning and that kind of thing. Wonderful woman. And one of my other teachers that I still work really closely with is Lupo Pissarro of Twin Star, Connecticut. She owns Twin Star Apothecary in Connecticut. And she is an incredible teacher. She lives this so deeply. It's part of who she is. And she gave me the tools to be the herbalist. She's mentored me as I started my business. She's taught me everything that she possibly could, even in her own personal time. Anyone who's looking to learn anything about herbalism, I know that she has an online class as well as in-person classes. And those classes are wonderful. I highly recommend doing them if you're interested. I've had the privilege as well to work with the Herbal Academy of New England. They are an entirely online school based out of Massachusetts. They also have an array of different types of classes all online. Wonderful, really huge resource of different types of teachers that study and offer different types of herbal directions. For some herbalists, it's how do I make products? For some, it's how do I bring this home to my children and offer this on a level where I can take care of my family? For some, It's having an apothecary where you can meet with clients and do clinical type work. There's so much that you can do with it. They definitely give a wide arrangement of different ways, different paths that you can take with your herbal journey. And I've been able to help with them a little bit. They had an entrepreneur course that they put out last year, and they asked me to be a part of it, which was really exciting. It was very validating to me that, again, I'm very tiny, but still having this reach into these communities that I love so much.
What led you on this journey?
For me, it was actually very personal. I was not feeling great. I actually worked for a trade show company called Reed Exhibitions, where we did a lot of trade shows, different types of stuff, B2B, B2C trade shows. So I was traveling a lot. I was exhausted all the time. I'd be going back and forth to Las Vegas a lot, New York City, traveling all around doing these shows. It was just such a grueling experience for me. And I was just drained all the time. And I couldn't figure out why all of my colleagues were like going out and partying in Las Vegas. And I was just like anxious to go to bed, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So after a couple years of going to different doctors and them basically just trying to treat symptoms, let's put you on this for depression. Let's put you on this for a possible thyroid condition. Let's put you on this for this and this. None of it ever made me feel any better. It got to the point where I spent 2 weeks in bed because I couldn't physically get myself out of bed to go to work. And I was like, all right, there's got to be something I can do for myself. I just wasn't getting enough from these 15-minute interactions with doctors. They were just recommending me to other people, and let's try this and let's do that. And none of it really got to the root of what it was for me. And interestingly enough, it was because of my own study in herbalism, my own desire to educate myself on nutrition. I found that all of my problems were because I didn't understand what I needed to eat properly. As many people probably know, you go into the grocery store and everything's marketed for healthy this, low fat that, sugar-free this, not realizing all the other chemicals and substances that are in these foods that we consume every day. And being a very active professional that traveled a lot, I didn't always have the best choices in food. So I didn't realize that I was making it harder for myself to function by not properly eating, consuming all these things that had sugars and chemicals that I didn't realize the good thing, the right thing, only to turn out that wasn't it. But along that way, I started to love nutrition. I started to fall in love with the idea that I could find different herbs to support myself right at home. And my kitchen slowly grew into this apothecary. I had jars everywhere because I was just mixing whatever I felt I needed in the moment. And there's such a beautiful power in that. There are quite a few things that are right at our fingertips that we can just understand and use within our home that can support us depending on how we're feeling that day. And that just made me fall in love with it. I had to have everything herbal related that I could find. And I started looking for classes that I could take at night so I could do my work, my day job, and still study to become, hopefully someday, a full-fledged herbalist. It's been a really amazing journey. It's very empowering when you realize that there's a lot of things that our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers and our great-grandmothers knew that we've lost, and we're trying to reclaim that now. It's such a powerful journey.
What would you say were the first few herbs that made the difference in your everyday?
Yes. It's funny to me. I always laugh because the very first herb I tried to play with for thyroid was bladderwrack. And it's this horrible smelling seaweed. I'm sure there's some people that love it, but as an intro herb, it was not for me. It was very stinky. I did not get past the smell. But what was really interesting for me is that I started to dig into all sorts of stuff. And when I had my herbal aha moment was I had been studying an herb called eyebright, which is at this point, it's really difficult to find, at least in New England, but I managed to find some. My father had just had cataract surgery and was on these steroids that he was using, and he would have to put drops in his eyes, and he would get huge, like really bad bloodshot eyes, even months after the treatment had started. He had to then keep renewing this medication that was $300, almost $400 a pop every month. And he was supposed to only use it for a month. So the fact that he was using it for repeated months was not good. And they just kept giving him more of the steroid. So I said, let me try something. My herbalist teacher and I had talked about it, and she thought that I should introduce eyebright. And then another herb, actually is more like a berry. It's called bilberry. And so he wasn't going to take a tea, but I got him capsules. And sure enough, within 3 weeks, he no longer needed the steroid. His eyes cleared up and he's not had an incident since. So that was my first, okay, there's like something to this. This is really interesting. Like, no, there are limitations. We understand that we can't do everything with herbs. There is a time and place for Western modern medicine, but how amazing that there's things that we don't even realize that can serve us, and they're right around us. So that was my first herb that I was like, okay, this is cool. I want to know what else I can do.
Wow. It's funny because it's even like things like echinacea, right? Isn't echinacea an herb? I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, nobody had really heard of it. And now it's in everything. And so I think people are starting to be aware, at least, that these can complement some of the more contemporary types of medicine that we use.
Absolutely. And how many herbs that we actually probably already have in our home and didn't know. Like most people will have chamomile tea, but they don't know all the benefits that it has. It's not just for sleep, it's for digestion. It's a really perfect herb for children, especially if they're fussy, having a hard time going to bed. There's just endless possibilities with chamomile, and it's something that's in most people's cabinets. They probably don't even know the full depth of what it can do.
Exactly.
And where were you finding the herbs? Were you sourcing them from different places, or was it local?
A little bit of both. So anytime that I had the ability to go to herb class, and I used to travel almost 2 hours to go to a herb class every week, because of where the class was actually located, we do a lot of wild crafting. So we would walk through woods or different areas that we knew were safe and harvest things that we could find, ethically source them. So this way you don't take everything. You always make sure that you leave some, but we would harvest anything that we could find. Nowadays, we try to grow some. I'm very lucky that a young man who works here during the summer when he's not in college, his studies in plant genetics and biotech. So he helps me with my garden every year. So we try to grow as much as we can. And then anything else that we can't get, because not everything would grow well here in Connecticut, which is a cooler temperature. We definitely try to ethically source from places where they're getting them sustainably and supporting the plant life as much as possible. Because some people definitely overuse certain plants and stuff and don't necessarily take care of them. So we have to think about the plants as we take from them as well.
Have there been some herbs that are your real go-to, the ones that you really want to make sure that you have at your fingertips?
Yeah. If I could pick 2 herbs that I would definitely go to all the time, it would be ashwagandha and holy basil, also known as tulsi. They're often paired together because they're known as very common Ayurvedic herbs. They are a wonderful pair for stress and anxiety. They're considered adaptogens, which means that they help the body adapt to stress. And so they do a good job of helping to calm us down. They actually help reduce our cortisol level, which is our stress hormone in the body. It physically helps lower our stress without making us sleepy. So it's a really good tea. I usually recommend that, or we have another adaptogen blend that we sell in the store. We recommend that for afternoons for people that are coffee lovers and shouldn't have caffeine in the afternoon, because caffeine stays in our body for 8 hours. So if you're having trouble sleeping, that's usually one of the first questions I ask is, how much coffee do you have a day? And then to switch to something like adaptogen blends in the afternoon. So this way you can still stay awake and alert, but not overly stimulated. And this way your body naturally gets tired when it's time to go to bed.
Oh, I didn't know caffeine stayed in your system for 8 hours. Wow.
So most people will have an afternoon cup of coffee. And basically what you're doing is you're borrowing from tomorrow's energy when you do that. So the idea is that you want to have 1 or 2 cups of coffee, like early in the morning when you first get up. And then by afternoon, switch to a tea that's either lightly caffeinated or herbal is always best, I think.
Definitely.
Prepares your body for the cycle of having to stay awake and then going to sleep properly.
And speaking of tea, so you have all these herbs and there's different ways to use them. How did you decide to harness that for tea? And can you talk a bit about the power of tea?
So for me, I fell in love with tea because it was easy to do at first. It was so easy to make tea, but then I realized it was actually an art form to it. It wasn't so much just dumping everything into a cup. It was, how do I choose the amounts and whatnot? So how do I actually make tea? That took experience playing with different plants and getting used to how they taste and how much I want to work with, depending on if I'm trying to support the physical or emotional or even spiritual body. So that again, that's a hard one to put into a nutshell, but it just took experience figuring out what I like to work with. And so I found that it was part of my daily ritual was to think about what I needed each day to support myself. And then having everything right in front of me in a cabinet where I could just pull whatever I needed is so magical. It's now become such an addiction that I had to get a shop so that I could support all of it because I had hundreds of herbs. It took over my kitchen. And when I moved in with my partner, she was like, I don't know where we're going to put this all. I was like, yeah, I need a shop. Basically, I need to start a business because I just had so much stuff. I love it. It's really amazing.
Can I also ask too, my husband and I were talking about this. When you talked about the art form, obviously of combining the herbs, but how about for making the tea? What is the best way to prepare your cup of tea?
Okay. So really important is to know what type of plant matter you're working with. If it's traditional tea, which is actually made from traditional tea leaves. So if it's like black tea, green tea, white tea, that kind of thing, they actually have different temperatures that they need to be brewed at. So having a teapot that would tell you what temperature you want your teapot at or how you want the water to boil will be really impactful for how the flavor tastes. The other thing that I had to explain to a customer the other day is less is more. I felt so bad. She was just dumping spoonfuls of stuff trying to make it the way we make it here. And I had explained to her, whoa, she came in for a bag a week later. And I was like, how did you use that much tea in a week? She goes, I'm using spoonfuls. No, you only need a little bit. So usually the size of a traditional tea ball or roughly like a teaspoon of tea per cup is enough. And then you want to make sure that the water is either hot enough. So if you're doing roots, berries, anything that's rough or thick, you want the water to be hotter and you want it to sit longer. If you're doing something that has a lot of flowers like lavender, jasmine, rose, anything like that, you don't want it to be quite as hot. Maybe about 185 is enough. And you actually want to pour high. So you want to pour high enough that it doesn't burn the flowers as the water hits the tea. I'm telling you, those really, it's like baking where the subtle differences make the difference in how the tea tastes. I've learned so much in the last few years just trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. So always recommend temperature gauging. If you don't have the fancy pot, you can just get a thermometer and just check the water before you pour it in. But yeah, less is more with the herb itself, and loose leaf is always even better. If you can get high quality plants, whether you grow them yourself, sometimes that's the best. If you have fresh plant matter that you can grab from your garden, that's the best tea ever.
And then for steeping, is each combination different, or is there recommended timing for steeping it?
Yeah. So I would recommend for most 4 to 5 minutes is pretty good. If it's something like chamomile, you want to take it out. So most people will leave their tea bags in, or they'll possibly leave their herb in. Take everything out if it's something like chamomile, because chamomile gets more bitter the longer it sits in the water. So if you want it to be sweet and that butterscotchy flavor, you want to take the herb out. Same thing with any other kind of light flower. You want to make sure that you're only steeping it for a few minutes. It'll really light floral taste to it versus your roots and berries and the heavier things, seeds, anything like that. You want to make sure that you're letting it sit a little bit longer.
Does the water influence, I know it influences the flavor, but does it influence the impact on the absorption into the body? The reason why I ask is I know you could cook these, right? You could steam them and ingest them that way. What's the power of the water combination with the plant?
For me, so the way my herb teacher used to talk about water in particular is that water carries a certain charge, an energetic charge. And that's why some people even will charge their water or tea or something before they take it, because it will resonate with us a little bit deeper. We are made of mostly water. So there's an element to that. I forgot the gentleman's name. There was a gentleman that did a study about the art of water, that being able to speak. I want to say his last name was like Moto or something like that.
Yes, that's right.
About how speaking to water and the intention that we add to water can influence the way that it grows and develops. So thinking about the fact that we're choosing plants that all have different personalities. So we as herbalists believe, or we as herbal enthusiasts believe, that there are different personalities and attributes that each plant offers us based on where it grows, the color, how it even reproduces, all sorts of things will tell us a little bit about what it does energetically, never mind medicinally, but energetically. And adding those intentions to water in particular has a different sense of power. It's an opportunity to make a ritual that you can make part of your day. It's super easy to do because it only takes you 5 minutes. This is part of my tea magic. I actually teach a little class on how to do tea magic, but one of the biggest pieces of that is asking the plant for its intended purpose to serve in the water, so that when you drink it, you're manifesting that type of energy that you're trying to bring in. So for me, it's always meant, I'm a water sign, so anything in water is wonderful for me. So that kind of has an added value to put your herbs in water and either drink it or even bathe in it, however you choose.
Oh, I love that. I bet you so many people have never really thought about drinking tea as a ritual or a spiritual practice. I love that you brought that up.
Super magical, especially because the fact that you could do it very easily each day. It doesn't have to be involved. Most people think that their magic or any sort of ritual things that they do has to be time consuming and you have to be super formal about it. And yes, those things are beautiful. But if you don't have time for that, sometimes it's as simple as I've chosen lavender today and I've chosen chamomile and I've chosen burdock. And these are going to support me today. And I ask for those attributes when I add them into my tea. So it's nice. It's such a beautiful way to kick off the day with whatever I need.
Or end the day. I know in my life, it really has, as you just said, it has become a ritual. And now I'm going to add to it intention. So
please.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you for that.
I always attribute that to how I found my wife. It was actually through tea magic. So there was one New Year's Eve that instead of going out partying, I decided to do a tea ritual with one of my best friends. And we did just that. We asked for the attributes we wanted and we added them to our water. And then we just enjoyed it. So I leave my teapot on a little trivet and I drink it over the course of a couple hours maybe. And And I ended up meeting my partner shortly after I did that. And it's funny to me because when I met her, she knew nothing about tea. And she actually that's really cute that you do that. Until I started making her tea, I made her fresh lemon balm that I grew in my garden outside of my home. And after that day, she was like, I don't know what that did, but it was the best night of sleep she's had. So now she's all about it. She's like, what can you give me for this? What can we work on with that? She's all into it now, which is lovely.
Thank you for sharing that. And 2 questions from that. One is, what did you say to manifest? Because I have a feeling people are going to be asking. And then I also want to just make a comment, which is your point in that she was like, what are you doing? And what is really the power in this? And then was transformed just because it actually did something, becomes a gateway, right? To the power of herbs.
Totally. Yes. She's actually my favorite person to try new things with because number one, she knows I'm never going to hurt her. I do have her permission to do this, but I don't always tell her what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And so I like to I will make a certain tea, but not explain to her what exactly is in it. I know her allergies. So I know that I'm obviously taking care. I'm making sure that she's safe, but I will give her things just to see how she responds to them. And one time in particular, I thought this was hilarious. I had cut down a ton of mugwort, which grows really crazy up here in New England. And I cut down a piece into a wand and I brought it home and I just set it in the bedroom on a dresser and I didn't say anything to her about it. And after a couple of nights, she said to me, I'm having really vivid dreams. I can't actually relax. Like my dreams are just super wild. I feel like I'm watching a movie. And then she stopped. She goes, what did you do? I started laughing because mugwort is so powerful for dreams, intuition, psychic abilities, even. It can open up your third eye. So energetically, it's a really powerful plant. And so I explained to her, I left the mugwort in the room. I didn't explain to her what it was, but she's, can you remove that now? I need to be able to sleep. So I took it out, but I get a kick out of doing stuff like that with her because she trusts me for one. So you always have to have their permission. And two, she doesn't always know 100%. So when she feels something, I know I've struck on something.
What would you recommend in terms of manifesting, manifesting a partner?
So I didn't realize this, that she and I actually did the same thing. She had written down in a different way. She didn't do a tea spell. She wasn't really into magic before she met me, but she had written in a journal all the things that she wanted in her partner. And so she wrote down very specific things that were important to her. And so did I. Mine was significantly more focused on how I wanted to feel with that person, more so than them having this laundry list of physical attributes or anything like that. Because while attraction is important, it wasn't the only thing that I cared about. So I wanted to make sure that I actually connected with a person that actually made me happy, that actually wanted to go on this life's journey with me, be a contributing partner. And so I used a lot of language around what it was that I really saw my ideal partner being and charged that into the water, into the herbs that I chose specifically for it. And along came my wife about 3 months later after I had been through a difficult breakup. And we ended up having a lovely friendship and it blossomed into more. And now we're married.
Wow. Power of intention.
Yes.
I love that story.
Totally.
Wow. Can we shift a little bit because your company name is Tea and Tarot? Such an intriguing combination. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into tarot?
Yes. So tarot was actually one that around the same time as I started my health journey, very independently, I found tarot. I had been going through a breakup. And so I ended up visiting a tarot reader. I went up to Salem, Massachusetts, and a gentleman did a reading for me. And he basically felt that I belonged to a line of white witches and that my intuition would come really naturally to me and that I would have an easy time learning this type of tool. So I let that sit with me for a little while. And I felt that it was a much healthier expression of my sadness during that breakup to put it into learning something new and trying to find something that made me feel better, or at least helped me move through that transition. I had actually tried to learn tarot when I was younger. I had bought an astrology tarot deck when I was in college, maybe. I could not figure it out to save my life. I didn't understand the first thing about astrology or tarot. So trying to learn that intuitively just didn't come. I've learned a lot more about where I would start or where I suggest to my students where they should start if they want to learn tarot. And it's not there. You don't start with the pretty fancy decks that have different avenues. That's not the place to start. So after I had this reading with this gentleman, I decided to pick up a deck and start playing with it. And it took me probably a good 2 or 3 years of just private study with it. Not that you have to go that route. I wasn't really intending it to be for anybody other than myself at first. It was just an opportunity for me to pull a card each day, reflect on how I felt, reflect on what I saw naturally, and then come back to it later on and see if those messages made sense to me a day later, a week later, a month later, etc. So it started very simply as just a tool to support myself more so than anything. And then later on, I started doing readings for family and friends. They would come to my kitchen and I would have tea. So I would go into my apothecary, and depending on whatever we talked about, I was like, oh, I know a lot about this different plant that would support this emotional need, or this flower essence that would support this emotional need. So it became this really organic expression of pairing these two mediums that just seemed to have this beautiful synergy with each other very naturally. So it was a way for me to offer the person that was sitting there across from me something to take with them, so that they're hopefully whatever they were going through, they could then use this tea or flower essence as a additional support long after our reading was over.
I really feel like people listening are going to now see this as a different type of resource. I don't think that most people, number one, have thought about tea this way, and then tarot and the combination. And can you also talk a little bit about the difference that you feel is between an intuitive and a psychic?
Yes. So I should preface this too, that I'm not the first person to combine herbs in tarot for sure. There are decks that I usually work with that are herbal decks, but I found they didn't necessarily lend themselves to tea. So that's how I ended up creating my own way and intuitively leaning on my own herbal knowledge, because there are fabulous decks out there. There's the herbal tarot and there's the herb crafter tarot. Both of them are gorgeous, but some of the things that they put on them are like garlic and cayenne and like not ideal for tea. So I'm not the first person to combine these two things. I can at least say that for me, I had to find a way to connect these two things in a way that translated into tea for clients. So that was my twist on kind of an existing practice. For me, the difference between intuitive and psychic is, at least my understanding, is that psychic abilities can give a depth of knowledge that may originate from the unknown. It could be from divine sources. It could be just a sense of self, but usually come with specifics, meaning that a psychic may have insight into very specifics like names, dates, places, colors, all sorts of things. They may intuitively know these things and be able to give a lot more detail. Whereas I feel there are definitely people that have these gifts, and perhaps someday I'll have honed mine enough to feel that I can do that. I think at this point in my journey, I feel that intuitive describes me a little bit better, because it is a sense of knowing, but it's not always highly specific. It's meant to dig into the unknown. And I do believe there's magic involved, but I'm not necessarily going to throw out a name or a date or something that specific.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I think so many people have either a misconception or aren't exactly sure the difference between the two. And I think intuition is a gateway to the more. Wouldn't you say the more you practice your intuition, the more you can potentially see?
And there will always be those that it comes more naturally to, and they don't have to work at it or practice it. They just see or feel or think or know certain things. For some of us, it may be more practice. I do believe that most people have an intuitive sense. I definitely feel like the feminine energy within us is definitely that direct lineage to our intuition, but how we practice it and how we use it is really on us to hone and to develop.
So how did these two practices of tea and tarot come into your business vision?
Yeah. How did this create this store and this online business?
Yeah. It started very organically for me. These two things started separately, and then I started to see them merge together because I fell in love with both of them independently. And I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago that I really started thinking about creating tea and tarot and making it more of a thing. I was working a day job in a corporate environment and sitting in a cube thinking like I'm living this double life, because as much as I loved what I was doing at the time, I really was feeling very called to this direction. It just felt really awesome to be able to support people in this very specific way. I never thought that I would have been able to manifest a physical location as quickly as I did. That happened. That surprised me. Even in 2020, I decided to open up a physical location. And on paper, I'm not even sure it made sense. My wife is a financial analyst, and she was like, I don't know if you should do this right now. We're going through a global pandemic. We'll probably be in the starting of a recession even. So she's like, I'm not sure this makes sense, but everything in me told me to do it. I ended up finding this beautiful house in a really beautiful part of New England in Madison, Connecticut. And the house is 300 years old. And when I saw this space, it had a cute little kitchen. I didn't need a commercial kitchen. So that was also like really special that I found a place that looked this beautiful, had a kitchen that was enough for me to do my dishes and make my products products, but it was so cute. And it was around the corner. It has these beautiful, gorgeous beams in it. There's something about it that was just so special. So I was like, I'm just going to try this. I'm just going to jump in. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work out and I'm back to my day job. So I decided to take the leap of faith. And it only confirmed for me that I had made a good choice, and that I found out shortly after I moved into the space and started setting things up. I found out the house had a really interesting history. There was a woman who lived here named Abigail Meggs. And I found this out because there's actually a plaque on the front of the house that says it belongs to our Madison Historical Society. Came to find out that Abigail Meggs was an activist herself. She used to host tea and spinning parties here in the house. And because she was protesting importation taxes of British goods, she would only serve herbal tea. So it really hit home for me that I had made a good choice and that this was a good time for this. It was also confirmed for me the number of women who walked through my door the moment that I opened. I realized that, especially for women, I had created a space where they could just exhale. So many of them had lost jobs. Their children were now home and they were tasked with having to homeschool them on top of their work. They were still trying to manage their households. The recession changed their finances. It also made it difficult for them just to figure out how to navigate their day to day. They were so overwhelmed. And so creating a space where these women could come in and just exhale for a minute, we could talk to them about self-care and support them in any way we could, just felt so good. It really was wonderful that we could pay it forward in that way. The first year, especially women of color, especially our queer community that lives near us. I was just really blessed to be able to do that with an amazing team that works here and helps support.
I was just going to say that just to underscore the fact that you opened the store right when COVID hit. So for many, you would think that would be probably the worst time. And really what you were affirmed was it was really the best time for your community.
And I had lucked out too. So the gentleman that owns this house, he bent over backwards to help me get in here. And I didn't even pay what he should have collected for rent when I first started here. He was so amazing. For a minute, I second guessed myself and I almost took everything off the table. And he called me and he said, how can I help you get into this house? He really supported my vision of what I was trying to do. And he made it accessible for me to do what I was doing. In so many ways, his kindness allowed me to then share, to be able to serve our community and be there and pay it forward. So that meant a lot to me that we could do that. And he was willing to work with me and make it easy for me to make this happen. I feel really blessed.
It feels like a soul connection. It really does.
Definitely.
And then did you have the foresight when you did open that you would then create this online presence, because you do such a beautiful job with how you are putting out messages into the world, which is how we found you.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to me. My background is in video production and marketing, and I've been in the corporate and commercial environment for so long that I understood branding and aesthetic. And so that was a piece of it for me. I'm a creative person at my heart. So I really wanted to take beautiful photos and do beautiful design and whatnot. Product development was really important to me. And all those things, was lucky that I had this background that I was able to tap into. I did find there's a learning curve. Like corporate branding and marketing is very different than personal branding and marketing. Corporate environments, you got a team of people and everybody's chipping in to do stuff. When it's just you and you're your full marketing team, plus the finance team, plus the product making team, plus your everything. You even have to do the dishes and take out the trash. It's a different ball game, but I learned really quickly that there were places that I really liked it. I'm very fortunate that I was able to tap another marketing person locally who was able to help support it, because it's basically takes two of us to do it. And there's a lot that needs to happen these days. You got to be on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, newsletters, websites, you name it. That's actually the parts that I really like. I like the marketing pieces of things. So that's fun when I get some time to spend doing that. And I'm grateful that I have a background that made it really easy for me to figure out how to navigate that world.
And you were talking about the team that you've created. And Karen and I, from talking to you prior, we know the integrity that you have with your work and then what you expect of those who are around you. Can you talk a bit about how you are committed to that type of integrity and what kind of offerings that you also have?
So we have a code of ethics that's really important to me. As a practitioner, I wanted to do more than just offer tarot. I wanted to change how we view tarot, at least within the world that I'm able to reach. There are so many different places where people people go to. I call them the neon signs, the people that are maybe not as genuine in intention, but they're accessible and they're everywhere. So when people think of tarot, they think of these types of people where they bring you in with this $25 reading. And then next thing you know, you find out that you're cursed and it's going to take $1,000 to take it off. And it's just super, super shady. There's also this kind of wave of misdirection and misinformation on social media now. For most of us that operate in these worlds, we're finding this to be a really big problem that I'm hoping the social media networks will work on. But I've had people take my full name, my full married name, and bait people for money online offering readings. And I don't solicit readings from people. Like we operate the same as a spa. You can make an appointment and come in and see one of us. Our pricing is listed on our website, so there's no surprises. You know what you're getting yourself into. We ask every single person when they come in to sign a note that says that they understand the limitations of what we can offer them. We can talk about all sorts of stuff, but if they have specifics around legal or health concerns, that they should go to the appropriate professionals. We've just established the expectations around what we can offer as practitioners. For me, it's so much more important that I shift this idea of what we've understood tarot to be from movies and from these neon signs to what it actually can be, that it's a safe tool that allows our intuition to surface whatever it is that we need to address. And then hopefully, if your practitioner is well trained, they then help you figure out what the next steps are. So for me, I do let people tell me everything that they need to tell me, but we stop at a certain point and I redirect them to what it is that they can do next. It should be just as empowering for them to know what their next steps are and to feel that they have something that they can do and take responsibility in some ways of what they can do to support themselves, more so than just me dictating certain things to them. It's meant to be more of a guided process. And honestly, that's why I use the word practitioner rather than reader. Reader says that you're in service to, you're just reading messages from something else, whereas practitioner is participation with the client as well. So you're getting their feedback. They should be part of this process as you figure out what their next steps should look like and what they need to support themselves. Usually, anytime that I've had any new staff practitioner or any sort of coach or professional in here, I look for them to talk to me about the client. If they start rattling off all the things they can do, that's wonderful. But if they don't talk to me about the client, then I know that they may need some help reframing that. But it's so important to us that we uphold these ethics, and they're clearly stated on our website. We constantly have to post about them and share them with people because we want people to feel safe in this environment. And I think because of that, because we're able to support people, especially when they're most vulnerable, I am very lucky that we've created this really special space. In fact, we've had more than 50% of our clientele are people who have never had readings. So for me, that is so clear to me that people feel safe enough they can come in here and they know what to expect. They can talk to us about it beforehand if they're not sure, if they want to understand what kind of services we offer, what they should start with. But it's really impressive to me that we've had so many people that just feel comfortable enough, safe enough to walk through our doors and experience what we have to offer. I'm very proud of that. My staff, my team is really proud of that too. We take really good care to support people when they're here. And for that, we've made it really important that we serve our community in that way. We're becoming this little staple over here, this place, this destination that people come out of state to see, which is really special to me.
And let's say we're not in Connecticut. Can you have some of these readings virtually?
Absolutely. Yes. So some of our practitioners don't do that service just because they don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's up to them. But yes, for many of us, including myself, I do offer online readings. I usually do it face to face so I can still see and experience that person a little bit. And yes, I do think it can be just as powerful, even if the client isn't able to turn their own cards over. I always prefer in person. If you have the ability to come and actually visit us, I always recommend that. But yes, we do absolutely do online as well.
First of all, I just have to stop and just say that answer to that question about integrity, I would love to make that the cornerstone of everyone's practice, because the way you serve that up is so important. And it's what Robin and I talk about all the time, what we stand for, and all the people that we talk to, even on our podcast, we want to make sure that they are on that same level, because I think the world is so much in need of these services. But you're right, so many people who go into these practices don't necessarily look at it from that perspective. They're just looking at it more as a business as opposed to this really important service when people, like you said, are their most vulnerable. So thank you so much for that, Heather. Can you talk about what a herbal tarot reading experience is like with you and your team? How does it all work together?
Absolutely. Each of our readers has a different approach. Mine is specifically herbal tarot. That's my specialty. So as I mentioned before, that there are certain tarot decks that have herbal alignments with each of the cards in the deck. I personally feel that because I want to be able to offer a tea or a flower essence or something that you can have to take with you after your reading, I've actually made it more of an intuitive practice. So while I'm sitting with you and I'm listening to everything that you're sharing with me, I'm usually taking notes. I'm trying to figure out what it is that I think would best support you in that moment, energetically and spiritually. So even though there might be some cards that tie in, and sometimes I will lean on the cards and then the associations that were there, intuitively, I know enough about the plants that there are just certain things that speak through that aren't associated with the decks that I actually use. So then by the time we get to the end of your reading, I usually have determined whether or not I feel like it should be a tea or flower essence that would support you best. I usually ask first. I don't assume that you want either. I ask first. And then depending on if you're okay with it, I then make the tea for you or I make the flower essence for you to take with you later, so that hopefully everything that we've talked about, everything that we've figured out would be your next steps in whatever it is that you're going through, you have a tool, you have an ally to support you beyond your reading. So you can take it every time that you're thinking about some of the things we talked about. If you need support for at home, if you just want a cup of tea while you talk to your partner about that stressful thing, or you need the flower essence to support you because you have an exam and you're super stressed, whatever that happens to be, there's a way for you to take what we've talked about with you. It's very empowering, but will have this lasting effect beyond just the hour or so that we sit.
I love that. I love that because with tarot, it's one of those experiences that can be hard to take with you or to have an action as a result of. It may provide insight, but it might not necessarily give you something to do with the information that you received. So I love that as an affirmation and a reminder.
And then you can incorporate and make it a ritual with what you take. And then, as you just said, Karen, it is then that reminder on a daily basis of what those next steps should be. And we're all about the taking action. You can get this information, but if you don't have something to do with it, it doesn't matter.
That's spot on. It's not so much the knowledge. It's how do we then make changes in our behaviors and our patterns that allow us to move through these things and get what we needed to out of that situation. So absolutely, 100%.
And Heather, do people typically come to you with an intention when they do a reading, or is it many people just come and just want the experience? And do you have maybe just a thought on what is the best way to get a good reading?
I don't know there's necessarily a specific thing that you need to do to get your best reading. I find that there's a mix of things. I usually preface everything by telling people that I believe we have free will, that you can take whatever resonates and leave whatever doesn't. And then I usually ask, is there anything that you want me to focus on? You can tell me as little or as much as you'd like, because some people want to just see what comes up. They want to see what I can come up with without giving me any information. Totally fine with that. I'm prepared for that. However, some people want to focus on something specific. And because we have a certain amount of time together, I always want to make sure that they get what they came for. So if they want to focus on their relationship and they want to get right into that, then they usually just say, I want to get right into my relationship. And we pull cards on that. This way I can we can get to whatever it is that they want to get to. I don't ever want anyone to leave the table feeling like they didn't get anything out of it. I've never, so far, knock on wood, I've never had that experience happen. And I think it's just because, again, I'm setting the attention before we start about what they can expect to get out of it. And I know where they want to focus.
Heather gave Karen and I a reading and it blew us away. So thank you. I know Karen had received a reading from you prior, but I hadn't. So I'm really grateful for your energy and your time, in addition to telling us and everyone listening about your journey, about tea, about tarot, about becoming an herbalist enthusiast. And can you tell everyone about your offerings on teaandtarotboutique.com?
Absolutely. First of all, it's my pleasure. I'm so glad that I had time to read for both of you. And hopefully there were some nuggets in there that will be helpful as you move forward. For me, on our website at teaandtarotboutique.com, we have an array of things. I've tried to make it easy so you can navigate it, but we offer a lot of our herbal products, which we make ourselves here. We also have our classes and workshops, as well as space where you can actually book a reading and you can see our full menu of all the things that we offer here within the shop. I also have to point out too that I have a tarot class called The Root of Tarot. It's an online class. It's a beginner course for someone who wants to just get started. I try to make it accessible and easy to dive into and to not feel that you have to memorize cards. I really don't like that approach to learning tarot. It's really how do you train your intuition so that you can read cards without having to memorize it. So that class is there for beginners. beginners. And then in January, I will be running a more in-depth one where I talk a little bit deeper about each card. We talk about emotional imbalances of each card and what it can mean in your career, what it can mean in relationship readings, home readings, family readings, so on and so forth. So we go deeper into each card, all the symbolism of them, how to read cards, how to tell the story that the cards are telling between each other, and how to connect to your intuition. So it's a deeper dive into it. It's an 8-week long training where it's online, it's virtual, but it's live with me so that I can help you guide you through it. It's more of a mentorship style.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Yes, I recommend
Perfect timing.
check that out. And people can also follow you on your different social channels, which I'm sure they can find at teaandtarotboutique.com.
Yes, absolutely. We are consistently across all platforms at the Tea Tarot Witch. So we have two, but they go through, and there's two different channels. There's one that's focused on the shop, and that's Tea Tarot Boutique, and that's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And then the other one, the Tea Tarot Witch, is me. So it's a little bit more about my personal approach to things. I try to talk about what the tarot cards mean, the different herbs mean. I'm also on all of those platforms, but it's a little bit more of a personal approach to it.
Thank you for everything today.
I'm so honored. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm intensely grateful that you found me. I'm so excited to see what the two of you build and put together. Everything that I know so far about what you're working on sounds incredible. And I can't wait to see it manifest. I hope we can stay in touch and I can see this grow and develop into something bigger. It's been such an honor. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, letting me have this moment to share this with you.
Thank you.
And believe me, we will be staying in touch because we see you being a part of what we're creating as well. So we are tremendously honored and grateful as well.
Thank you so much.
You just feel part of the soul family, Heather. You really do. Hey!